Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. We are waiting for a few more people to join. Let's give it a couple of minutes. Also, for your information, this session is being live streamed on Facebook. So feel free to keep your videos off. The spotlight is on me, and your videos can be off. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. Let me right at the outset explain the purpose for this session. Why did we think of doing this session? A lot of people, especially students of psychology and early practitioners, approach us with this question of how do you decide which therapy should you specialize in? And okay, we've learned a little bit about REBT in our college, but how do we decide if we want to really take it forward as our specialization? And I mean, we try and answer whatever we can on a phone call, but that's a broader answer, right? I think it's important that people get some kind of a preview of a therapy before they can decide if they want to specialize in it. And especially because we say that the decision to specialize should largely depend on, does the therapy resonate with you? Is that something that you would live by in your life? Would you apply it to yourself? And how will you know that if you don't know much about the therapy? And whatever little that we study at our undergrad, postgrad levels is unfortunately not enough to give us that idea. And so we thought that, okay, let's do this very brief session, not more than 30 minutes at the most, which is like a preview of REBT. So I want to talk about aspects of REBT that are close to my heart, right? That I really find valuable as a student of REBT over the years and also as a practitioner of REBT for now, close to 20 years. So I thought I'll talk about those aspects. So this is especially going to help people who are not very familiar with REBT and would like to kind of get to know it in a way that they can decide if they want to learn more of it, right? So that's the purpose. Okay, what I want to start with in the context of REBT is one of the things that I also like to teach very early on in our training programs is that this whole therapy is very anchored to what the client values. Meaning, uh, that we're very well aware when we practice REBT that it is a means in therapy. It's not the goal. My goal is not to teach the client REBT, right? My goal is to use this therapy as a means so that they can move towards what they value and what their goals are. So we are very interested very early in our interaction with our clients in what does this client value in their life, which is being blocked, right? They're here in the session with me. Let's say it's the first session. They are here because something that they value is being blocked. And I will not be able to fully understand their disturbance if I don't understand what it is that they value that is being blocked. So, our entire framework that we use to understand our clients' emotional disturbance, behavioral disturbance, is anchored to what do they value. And that's kind of my favorite piece about REBT because it gives you a solid anchor. So you're going to keep that broader perspective throughout your interaction with the client. That you're not just looking at things from a worm's eye view, that you're taking the bird's eye view when you look at the client's problem. And then the framework. Now, most of you, I think, may have heard about or studied a little bit about REBT, which is a framework that we use to understand, human emotional and behavioral problems. Now, that's very anchored to this value. So, what A stands for, or what we understand as the client's problem, A stands for adversity, right? Now, what is the client's adversity? Is nothing else but that block in the way of the client's goal. So let's say that I want to this is my career goal that I want to become. Just today I was talking to someone, a client, and they said that their goal is that they want to become a public speaker. They want to be able to do more work in groups, speak in front of groups, and that's their goal. And if that's the goal, then their anxiety about performing badly is going to become their adversity. That's what is blocking their value. The value, which is that I want to become a public speaker, or the value that I want to stop hiding and I want to be seen by people and not just physically seen, right? I want to sort of show up and stop hiding behind various reasons and excuses. Now, that is a value. Then they're experiencing a block when they say, oh, but what if I make a mistake? What if I perform badly? What if people don't like what I say? So that becomes their block or their adversity. And then they experience this emotion of anxiety about it, right? If they do it and do badly, then they will experience the emotion of shame about it. And that's how then we sort of understand their emotions, that their emotions are then a reaction, a habitual reaction. That's why I'm using the word reaction, not so much a response, but a habitual reaction to what they are seeing as their block. Oh God, what if I make a mistake? Oh God, what if people don't like me? And then they feel that emotion. And I mean, this is the second favorite part of mine about REBT, is that we spend a lot of time understanding and assessing emotions and emotional disturbance in our clients, right? That's something that we don't rush. In fact, that's at the center of really our problem conceptualization. How do I understand this person's problem? Right at the core of that question is, that I spend time and I sort of invest skill in understanding their emotions. And now, what do I mean by understanding? labeling their emotions. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about it these days, that it's very important to label affect. I mean, so one of the things that people struggle with a loss with a lot, even before they understand the emotion in detail, they struggle to even label it. Like, I don't know what to call it, right? That's what clients might say, or they might use some very generic words like, I'm upset, I feel sad, I feel bad, I feel, confused. And and they're genuinely struggling. They don't know what to call it. So to help them to even accurately label their emotion is a big step, because it's like then saying, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. And so I'm probably going to do a better job of actually dealing with it, because I know that I'm dealing with anxiety, not anger. Sometimes it seems like anger. We get angry, and it seems like an angry outburst, and you know you would see it as anger and the other person might see it as anger. But very often when we talk to people and we assess what's going on actually in their mind, and we see that, hey, you know what, it's not anger that they're actually disturbed with. What they're disturbed with is anxiety. That something that someone said has actually that they feel anxiety towards it, and with that anxiety they react to that anxiety with what looks like angry behavior. It could be defensive anger, in other words, right? So how do I know the difference between, oh, is this anxiety, is this anger? If I'm angry, why am I also crying? So is it hurt, or what's going on, right? People are confused. So a very big thing in REBT is to help people label their emotions and to see the difference between these emotions, right? How is shame different than anxiety when it feels very similar? Or how is shame different than depression, again, when the experience can be similar? So we help people do that. And how do we help people do that is because we have an elaborate theory of emotions, meaning, a theory of, okay, what thoughts and behaviors accompany these emotions, right? How does the thinking, feeling, behaving interaction look like for each emotion? For guilt, what is the thought that's also feeding the guilt, and what is the behavior that goes with guilt, and how is this behavior then feeding back into my emotion, right? And strengthening my guilt. So it's not in a straight line like this, one after the other. It's quite circular in its relationship. And so we spend a lot of time we have an elaborate theory that helps us do it. As a therapist, I'm really grateful that that it gives me this theory that I can go back to and be guided by. And then clients can benefit from it because, as I said, labeling emotions and knowing the distinction. And while you know the distinction, then you also know what underpins these emotions, right? What's coming with guilt? What are the thought patterns coming with guilt? What are the thought patterns accompanying helplessness or hopelessness? What are the thought patterns accompanying hurt, etc.? And so it becomes, it's almost like you kind of become more familiar with your own disturbance. So it doesn't seem scary. It doesn't seem like something that you're overwhelmed with and you don't know what to do about it, because it's like a newfound relationship with your own disturbance. That, okay, oh, this is not a monster. I know it now, and I know it well enough to be able to deal with it. So once we are able to, the framework, that's why is really beautiful. And the framework says this. Now, this is something that I want to say because, like I said, if this resonates with you, if this is something that you can relate to, then maybe you want to specialize in REBT. Who knows? So, this, what I'm about to say, the framework, which says that, okay, hey, I'm feeling certain emotions and I'm behaving in certain ways. And to me, right now, it seems like something outside of me is creating this emotion and making me behave this way. Because my partner cheated on me, therefore I'm feeling hurt, and therefore I keep crying, and I feel helpless, hopeless in life. So unless they change their behavior, my disturbance cannot change. right? Or because this goal of mine, whatever the goal is so difficult to achieve, therefore I'm anxious. So, in other words, it's like saying, okay, so make it easy for me. Only if it becomes easy, then I will stop being anxious. And thankfully, in REBT, we strongly believe the theory strongly advocates that that's not true. It's not entirely true that external situations and what they could possibly represent in terms of a possible threat or a possible, some of my rules are being broken, or I didn't get what I want, or I got what I didn't want, or it's unfair, and all of that. And that happens in life, right? That happens to all of us. But thankfully, none of that is directly causing emotions in me in a way that I'm helpless or powerless and I can't do anything to deal with it, right? That I can only kind of keep waiting for the situation to change or keep fighting the situation and make it change. And, again, just today, um, earlier in the day, sorry, I was speaking with a couple, and again they want very different kinds of marriages. The husband wants a marriage which is just sort of in a way transactional, and we're having fun, we're friendly, but nothing more than that. And she wants a fully engaged, involved, and we're in love with each other kind of a marriage. And she kept going on throughout the session, even when this became clear, and I know it was painful for her, but she kept coming back to, but why can't he be the way I want him to be? Is it wrong for him, for me to want that kind of a husband? Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be? And as you can see, I mean, she was not wrong in what she wanted, and yet she was really struggling to accept that this person was not willing to give her what she wanted. So as a result, she kept fighting it because she thought only if he changed, her disturbance is going to change. And she can't do anything to help herself if he doesn't change. So I could see her desperation for him to change, right? All her efforts were really him driven. And in REBT, we work on changing that because, you know, you have a much better chance to work on your own mind window and what you are bringing to the table and how you are contributing to your disturbance than you have of changing the other person or the external event or the situation. Maybe you can, and you can always be hopeful. But before that, that's why the B comes in the ABC framework. B is my beliefs or my basic attitudes, my mind window. And we help our clients identify what goes on in that mind window, right? What is my pattern which has brought me to this place of also contributing to this extreme hurt about my partner's behavior, right? And that we know that these are patterns. So what I mean by patterns, and again, that's a beautiful aspect of REBT, that it can give you, when you're working on one problem, you're not just working on that particular situation or that particular problem. It's very likely that you're going to help your client with other such situations and problems where they are bringing the same patterns to the table, unwittingly, unknowingly. So we work on patterns. Patterns, as the word means, is something that is repetitive, that I am showing up with the same mindset over and over again to those situations. And then I kind of keep, creating the same disturbance over and over again. And that I'm not powerless in changing this, right? Once I see, oh, this is my pattern. So maybe unfortunately I can't change the other person or the external situation always. But hey, you know what? I'm not 100% powerless, that I can work on modifying my patterns and change my experience of this, right? That it can be painful, and well, things in life are going to be painful. We can't escape pain entirely, but that I often like to say that at least that I'm not creating suffering for myself. with that pain, or that the pain is not the whole story of my life, right? It's not only this, that I can live with the pain and also create some positive emotions in other aspects of my life, right? Or, engage with other aspects of my life. And that's possible when I first see that I'm not powerless, that nothing is causing this in me entirely, and that I have a role to play. I'm bringing patterns. So, very big part of our work in REBT is to work with clients to identify these patterns. And it helps to have a good theory. I don't know if you guys have heard this about REBT, that they say that it's an active directive uh, way of therapy. And what that means is, I think, relevant at this point, if you guys are with me, that that I am not, as an REBT practitioner, I'm not waiting for the client to uncover their own patterns on their own, of course, with support from me, but I'm not passive or non-directive in that relationship, right? I am active directive, which means, hey, you know what? I have a theory of what their patterns could be based on my training. I'm familiar with that theory. I've practiced, using that theory. And so that's the benefit that I can bring to the table as their practitioner, that I can bring a hypothesis and say, maybe these could be your patterns. And there are certain patterns that we do, the REBT theory does propose. So I can say, you know what, maybe these are your patterns. Do you think you have, an attitude towards self berating or self devaluation, right? For example, that's one of the patterns that we identify. That do you tend to globally rate yourself as worthless, as a failure? Okay, and if there is that pattern, then that pattern will show up in different situations. So going back to my example of, let's say, this person wants to perform, speak in front of people, and they're thinking, oh my God, what if I make a mistake? Hmm? Now, that's a thought that they have. It's like an inference or an assumption they make, that, oh my God, what if I'm making a mistake? What if I will make a mistake? Now, I can always, try to rescue my client, as we like to call it, right? So, how? I can always say to my client, oh, why do you think you're going to make a mistake? I'm sure you're well prepared. I'm sure you're, you know, skilled enough, and it's going to go very smoothly. Don't worry. Now, I can try to change this thought that they have, that I might make a mistake. But in REBT, what we do is, like I said, we're more interested in the repetitive, sustained pattern that they carry, their mindset. So what's the mindset? The mindset in this case could be that if I make a mistake, then it proves that I'm worthless. So I hope you see that. Then do you see, it's not about just this public speaking performance, and it's not just about this mistake. This person who carries this, right, this mindset that I am worthless if I make a mistake, do you see how they're going to carry that pattern to many different situations? They could be in a social gathering, and maybe they are asked to kind of say a few words on the mic, and they might freeze because they're thinking, oh God, I have to give a flawless speech, and if I make a mistake, then I'm worthless, right? It could be, a viva, like an oral exam. So it's going to basically show up in different situations where they are likely to make a mistake, and they're going to keep going back to, if I make a mistake, then I'm worthless, and then they're going to be anxious. So what we do in REBT is, I'd like to believe, therefore, depth centered work, that we're not just helping this client to change this thought that I might make a mistake, but I want her to see that even if you make a mistake, you're not it's not going to prove that you're a worthless person, that it just means you're a complex, fallible person who can make a mistake and made a mistake this one time, or maybe five more times, right? But it does not prove in any kind of a global, stable way that you're worthless and you can only and only make mistakes if you get the flow of that, right? So, I mean, for people who are on the outside, so to speak, and listening to this, right, who have had no kind of special training in REBT but want to know it, I'd like them to kind of register this part of the framework, that we want to work on patterns such that we give them sustained benefit. And that's also what makes this therapy efficient in a way, which is also why it's not a very long-term therapy. There's no hard and fast number of sessions. Again, it's not like we have to finish in 5 sessions, or that's not one of the parameters of its effectiveness. But I'm saying it's efficient because you don't have to now work with every new situation as a, starting from scratch kind of a thing. That if this person is able to change her self-devaluation attitudes and move towards self-acceptance, then she's going to be hopefully able to apply it to similar situations. And that's also the educative aspect of REBT. The other thing that I really, really love about REBT is that it's educative in nature, meaning in therapy, we are also having our clients practice what they learn so that they are getting, in a way, they're getting trained in it themselves. Though we don't do it as a training, of course, it's still a therapy setting, but they're learning to do it with themselves. They're learning to use those tools. They're practicing using those tools back at home, such that then they can take it and keep using it, a repeat value sort of a thing for different problems. Very often, even without the therapist's help, and they come back to therapy, only if they struggle and they need help. So it's also making clients independent in that sense. That's also another aspect of REBT that I really, really like. And while we do this, I mean, one more thing that kind of comes to my mind at this point is I've often had people asking me, but I mean, isn't it only for intellectuals? Because there seems to be a lot of emphasis, because, it is a form of cognitive behavior therapy. And there is all this talk of thoughts and beliefs and mindset and attitudes, which are all cognitions. And so people will say, isn't it only for intellectuals, people who understand at an intellectual level? And I understand how it can seem like that, but that's not entirely true. Because we are one more aspect, and maybe one of the last couple of things that I want to say is that we forget that it is actually a multimodal therapy. That's why the long name, rational emotive behavior therapy. We could have just, he could have just called it rational therapy, Albert Ellis, who created it. But the long name is because we know that the disturbance can manifest itself on all levels: thoughts, emotions, and behavior. And even physiologically, in fact, right? We're complex. And so disturbance is going to express itself in a complex way. And so, it would be completely unhelpful for any therapy to say, oh, but we only work on thoughts, or we only work with changing emotions, or we only tell you what to change in behavior. That's not going to be helpful holistically, right? And so REBT is a multimodal therapy because we realize that when the experience of a disturbance is, there is disturbance in thoughts, in emotions, in behaviors, in your body, everything. And therefore, when we help clients with this disturbance, our intervention strategies are also multifold. So we will work on helping them change their thoughts, and then also help them achieve a shift in their emotional experience, right? Like how they feel it in their gut or their body, in other words. And then, of course, also change it in action. Am I doing things differently? Am I making different choices in action? And we handhold them through this entire process with, homework exercises between sessions. They can come back, bring their feedback, and then we make alterations where we're happy to go back and forth, right? We don't expect just like progress in one direction in a linear form. We appreciate that things are going to be non-linear. The process of change is difficult. So it's the kind of therapy that kind of appreciates these nuances and looks at, REBT, or I mean, has the potential, rather, I should say, to kind of use, if you learn it well, like even as a client and as a student or a practitioner of REBT, has the potential for it to become a way of life. So it really tries to achieve that kind of philosophic change, as we like to call it, not just behavioral, or not just sort of, not at a surface level, or not temporary short term, though there's nothing wrong with short term change, but not only short term change, right? That's not going to help. So some sort of, change at the level of, how do I live my life? Do I live it now with a different kind of a more helpful mindset or attitudes? And do I have a sustained tool and a set of techniques that can help me to keep making the more helpful choice over and over again? And we'd like to believe that that's what we do offer our clients. So, I mean, in my opinion, therefore, of course, and I mean, one might say my opinion is biased because I do love REBT, as I hope you can see. But the points that I presented are also objective facts about REBT. They're not just my opinions about it. But I'd like to believe that this is the kind of therapy that can bring things together for new practitioners. Meaning, again, because we're not very rigid in terms of we only do this much, right? We have a much broader outlook towards practice of therapy. So, and we have so many cognitive, emotive, behavioral tools in our repertoire that, okay, if you learn something else somewhere and that appeals to you and you want to use it as a part of the REBT framework for a particular client, you're most welcome to do it. So it's also a lot of adapting and growing and expanding, really, because you can apply tools and techniques from multiple different places and put it together. Because again, like I said, it's a multimodal therapy. And it's not restricted by, you can only do this much. It has structure, but it doesn't have rigidity. They're two different things. So it's beautiful to have a structure that you can then use with flexibility. So I feel like for, that young practitioners will not feel bound by it. And yet it will give you some kind of a very, so not some kind of, actually quite a well-formed framework and structure to build your practice on. And so that's the reason that I wanted to present these points. I think I've kind of spoken, I mean, enough in terms of the purpose that we had in mind for this session. I hope I kind of touched upon parts of REBT that, according to me, are lovely parts. And of course, the time is insufficient. I'm aware of that. We do elaborate trainings, which are much longer. But again, for people to just consider what this is and whether this is something that they want to learn more of, I hope this can be the first step for many people in that direction. Okay, so if there are any questions, I'm happy to take a few questions about the therapy, about anything that I said, or about anything that I didn't say, but you have a question on your mind about it. We can talk about that too. The other thing about REBT is, I mean, till somebody raises their hand, and nobody's asked anything yet. The other thing about REBT is also that it can be taught. And as a trainer, of course, that's my favorite part, that it's possible to really learn steps and then give feedback on those steps, which is, I mean, we call it peer counseling, which is a very important part of all our trainings, is that a supervisor can actually look at what you're doing and can give you feedback that is concrete, and you can bring back, use that feedback and then come back and try again. So it's possible again because it is very teachable, trainable as a therapy. So that's the other important part of it. Yes, somebody's unmuted themselves. I don't know if they have a question. Drama? No. Are there any questions? All right. Well, in which case, that's it. Thank you for attending this session, and I hope it gave you something to think about. This is way more than we can ever explain over a phone call when people ask us, you know, how should they decide and what therapy should they practice. But begin here, and then based on it, maybe pick up some books, get more learning about it. You can always come back to us, approach us. Then we will put some contact details in the chat if you want to approach us and ask more questions or understand this better. And so that then you can decide if this is something for you to base your career upon.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How do I say your name?
Jama.
Jama. Yes, Jama.
I just wanted to know, like, when you started practicing like counseling therapy, how
Yeah.
do you know which form, like which modality you wanted to use? Like, did
Hmm.
you explore all areas, or was this
No.
REBT that struck very strong to you?
So I'll tell you my answer is, and this is my honest answer, it was by fluke really, and I'm so glad that I came upon REBT. But what happened with me was I was as confused after my post-graduation about what I wanted to do. Psychotherapies were not really, I did my PG in clinical psychology. Psychotherapies were not taught well,
Right.
and I didn't know. I had liked whatever little I had heard about REBT, but not enough to kind of make any decision. As it turned out, this senior REBT practitioner, unfortunately, he's no more now, Kishore Fadke. He is my first teacher in REBT. He was also the first fellow and supervisor of the Albert Ellis Institute from India. He was doing trainings back then, and somebody came to our college and said, there is this training, do you want to attend it? And just because I didn't know what else to do, I said, okay, I clearly need to know more. This is not enough. I cannot start my practice just based on what I know. And so I said, okay, maybe some training in some specific therapy is a step forward. Luckily for me, that therapy turned out to be REBT, and my teacher was fantastic. So in that sense, it was by fluke, but that's exactly why this kind of a session, Jama,
Mm.
that people don't know. So it's maybe a good idea to kind of attend. I don't know if anyone else is doing sessions with other therapies, but I wish they are, because then you kind of get a glimpse of, okay, what is this person saying? Does this resonate with me? That's a very important marker, according to me.
Mm. Mm.
And, that is this something that I would use in my life? Is this something that I would advise to my loved ones if they were in trouble? Would I say, you know what, there is this great framework, and, maybe you want to think about it like this? And if your answer is yes, then that's the therapy you want to specialize in. I mean, so this is one way, or I mean, picking up a short book on some therapy and reading it and seeing if that
Mm.
makes any sense is another. Of course, you can always enroll for a proper training program,
Right, right.
but then, I mean, I understand how many training programs can you do? So you want to decide before you enroll if this is something that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay. Anyone?
Ma'am,
Yeah,
yes.
Rashmi.
Someone has asked.
Yeah.
So the question is, REBT is not famous, and we know about CBT a lot, but not a lot of people are aware about REBT.
Hmm.
So will getting trained in REBT help us?
Well, I'm surprised that they're saying REBT is not famous, but at the same time, I do also understand the confusion. I'm calling it a confusion because CBT as a word has become synonymous with Aaron Beck's cognitive therapy. And Beck's cognitive therapy is more famous, if you want to call it that, for sure. But REBT is also a form of CBT, and that's what most people don't know about it. That it is, in fact, the oldest form of CBT. And in fact, that Aaron Beck was very inspired by Albert Ellis when he started developing his own form of cognitive therapy. So in fact, it has, like I'm saying, it has roots that go further, sort of further behind in terms of its in terms of the number of years for which REBT is being practiced around the world. And also this part of the framework where I spoke about that it focuses on in-depth patterns and working on modifying those patterns is what makes it really unique. So I'm trying to address the part of should you get trained in it? You should still get trained in it, according to me, and that consideration should be based on the value addition that it brings. And the value addition that it brings is as much, if not more, than some of the other forms of CBT can bring. So it may not be now as well known also because it was developed many years back, and now new forms of third wave CBTs have come in, ACT, DBT, and so it can tend to get kind of lost in the number of names, but it is one of the oldest forms. And it is, if you see the core of REBT, then you will see that ACT, DBT, all of them have sort of influences of it. So, well, I'd strongly recommend you should get trained in it based on its value, even though it's not as famous. Okay, thanks for that, Prashmi. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your time. You guys have a good evening. I hope this was helpful. Take care. Bye.